Welcome to a special edition of Anglican Unscripted, episode 84, the GAFCON appraisal, where Kevin and George sit down and tell you everything that they think about GAFCON. I'm Kevin Carlson.
And I'm George Conger. And today's November 2nd, 2013.
George, as you know, we've been getting a lot of email from viewers asking, hey guys, where is Anglican Unscripted? It's been a couple weeks. And we held off because it's not fair to report on GAFCON before GAFCON, during GAFCON, and right after GAFCON, because in reality, George and I believe that the Holy Spirit has a place in this much more than two whiners, middle-aged men from America. Our brothers and sisters from around the world in the Anglican Communion were flying to Nairobi, Kenya to allow the Holy Spirit to work in this movement called GAFCON. George and Kevin don't need to be sitting there telling people what they need to be doing, how they should be handling the meeting. They don't need outside interference. So we held off till now because we got to witness the Holy Spirit working at GAFCON. Now we get to report about it. So that's what we're going to do. To start off with, we need to talk about our expectations. George and I have had lots of talks behind the scenes about how we expected GAFCON 2 to go. And the reality is both George and I had pretty low expectations. GAFCON 1 in Jerusalem, as you know, was a home run. They produced the Jerusalem Declaration. They produced the ACNA, the Anglican Church in North America. And for some unforeseen reason, they forced the Archbishop of Canterbury to feel compelled to attend GAFCON 2. A lot of stuff happened behind the scenes with that, but we'll talk about that later. Those three things make GAFCON 1 a big success. The conference GAFCON 1 wasn't the success, the fruit of it was. And we're going to treat GAFCON 2 the same way, looking at the fruit. George, what were your expectations?
Going in, they were low. And that centered on logistics and agenda. Moving, housing, transporting, feeding, protecting 1,300 people in Nairobi is a very, very tall order, especially on short notice. There's just not the infrastructure in Nairobi that one would expect one would need for such an organization. Nevertheless, All Saints Cathedral, brand new venue, fantastic job.
Oh, sure.
I was really floored. This was better organized, better run, tighter, not in the sense of a heavy hand of control, but it flowed smoothly. There were no glitches. There was no obvious crashes of the machine running the show. Much better than Lambeth conferences, much better than most Anglican shindigs I've been to. This really was a professional job. And Peter Jensen, the Archbishop of Sydney, the General Secretary of GAFCON, put it down to Magic Martin. And do you know who that is?
That's Martin Minns, and we saw him working behind the scenes. Every once in a while you see a tall guy with a straw hat walk by. That was Bishop Martin Minns working behind the scenes, keeping things flowing. It was interesting to watch. He was not forefront center making speeches and doing the things you expect of a bishop to do. Bishop Martin Minns is one of the few bishops who's gifted with the gift of administration. And you're like, wow, we never heard of this before. No, there are a few bishops that have that gift. He's one of them. And he really had a lot going against him. 3 weeks before GAFCON 2 was the Westgate Mall attack. 2 months before GAFCON 2, the international airport in Nairobi burned to the ground. We could go through a whole list of other things that were really, going to be stressful for people who are planning it. So at this point,
Kevin, I think we should mention, for instance, Kevin and I stayed at the Nairobi Hilton. The power would go out every so often, and people would be stuck in elevators, and you wouldn't have power for about an hour, 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Kevin Kevin and I were attacked by bed bugs.
Yes.
Something that you just don't expect at a Holiday Inn in Wichita, you get in a Hilton in Nairobi. Little things like that could have some sort of illness from washed lettuce at the luncheon. Could have taken out half of the Anglican Communion's conservative primates. It didn't happen.
No, it didn't.
Apart from the bed bugs, it was a really great show.
So, we're going to applaud Bishop Martin Mins. Good job. And if he wants to plan GAFCON 3, he has our full support. It was a grand show all around. I mentioned in the first segment that Archbishop Justin Welby felt compelled to attend. And we're going to give you a little bit of the background story because we've talked to people who know what happened. He was originally approached back in January and said, listen, we want to invite you to the event. He said, I can't really make it, got plans and stuff like that. And sometime in early April, after some convincing from people we don't know, he contacted GAFCON and said, I want to be there and I want to address the open plenary. And they're looking at their schedule and said, it's already booked. We would love to work you in. We want to put you someplace. Here's your options. You can address the GAFCON primates. You can do the open Eucharist, something like that. But the schedule towards the week, that's full. So he agreed to do the opening Eucharist and speak to the GAFCON primates the first day of the event, which was on Sunday. So that's interesting. Why would he feel compelled to go there, George?
Where does the power lie within the Anglican Communion? Mm-hmm. Where does authority? Who has the ability to bring firepower into a battle? It's GAFCON. It's the Church of Nigeria. It's the Church of Kenya. It's the Church of Uganda. It is the numbers on the ground, the churches that can provide the troops to the fight. I really need to give credit to Justin Welby because his approach to GAFCON evolved over the course of a day and a half. Now, before he flew out, he recorded a video message that was shown to the GAFCON delegates on, I think, the Wednesday of the conference. Mm-hmm. And I have to tell you, that video went down like a lead balloon. He was flat. He had no facial affect. Somebody said to me, one of the Australians said, I wonder if the guy's on lithium because he just has no facial movement whatsoever.
Well, it would have been a perfect key in for an Alka-Seltzer commercial. I mean, it was that bad.
And also that the message he gave while recorded in London was full of hesitation and bureaucratic doublespeak, and it was a bad show. It was a sort of a combination of a Rodney King, why can't we just all get along, versus with moral equivalency. You're bad, they're bad, we're bad, let's all get along.
Sure.
Went nowhere. So he flies out to Nairobi, arrives at, I believe, 2 a.m. His flight from London was delayed, goes to sleep at Archbishop Wabukula's house, and is up 4 hours later to give his first sermon, morning prayer at the cathedral in Nairobi. And that first sermon, which he read from a text with some additions to sort of mark the day, was a disaster. Kevin, you remember what happened after the service, don't
sure.
you?
Well, I was recording the service, and I didn't pick up on it so much because I'm giving Justin Welby the biggest, benefit of the doubt one can give. However, as we walk out of the service, I see an African charging towards George and I, and he's jogging, and I'm like, he's going to tackle George. This is bad. I'm going to get my camera out, at least I can tape it. And all of a sudden he stops short, he grabs you by the lapel, and what does Archbishop Peter Akinola say to you?
Peter Akinola, with his hands on my lapel, tells me, first word, outrageous! That was outrageous, and he began to berate Justin Welby for basically being a Rowan Williams clone. Mm-hmm. What Peter Akinola heard was a sermon on moral equivalence. Americans are bad for having gay bishops and gay blessings. GAFCON is bad for responding to gay bishops and blessings by creating the ACNA because That's border crossing. I, Justin Welby, will be the impartial referee that will separate you two battling drunks. You're bad, they're bad, we're all bad, let's all forgive each other and get on with life. That message was what Ron Williams preached, and that just infuriated Peter Akinola.
Well, I think a lot of people kind of caught on to, boy, that first performance is not what we want to judge Archbishop Justin Welby on. He improved when he did the Eucharist at 11:30. His message was decidedly different, George.
It's the same sermon, but it was 5 minutes shorter. First sermon, no reference that I remember to GAFCON. There may have been one. Oh, by the way, he was supposed to be there for solidarity in the Westgate bombings. He never mentioned the bombings in his sermon, so I guess he forgot.
Oversight.
But first time, maybe one mention in passing to GAFCON. Second sermon, 5 positive mentions of GAFCON. He changed his sermon, shortening it and changing it and softening it here and adding stuff there, so that people hearing the second sermon, when Holy Communion was celebrated, came away thinking Justin Welby has given his personal support to the GAFCON movement. This guy's backing us. This is wonderful.
Sure.
And then we had, I think, from my mind, the most surprising thing that happened all week. We're standing after the 11:30 Eucharist outside. We're snapping away. Kevin's filming, and there's sort of a scrum there, and Justin Welby sort of gets pushed over to one side. He's a smallish guy, and Eliud Wabakula, he's big, and these guys are big. And Justin Welby turns to Kevin Carlson and says, "Hello, Kevin." And
not my proudest moment. Obviously, yeah.
and he didn't even say, "Where's the other guy?" I was really hurt.
Okay, so he may be a fan, whatever, but and this is why we're giving you
I
the
think,
benefit of
Kevin,
the
you're
doubt.
on an enemies list in London somewhere. There's a front profile, front and side face
No,
that
no.
do not talk to this man.
When he opens his closet door, there's a dartboard. It has my picture. I know how he knows me. So, we saw and witnessed Archbishop Welby changes his tone and understand that GAFCON is here to stay. Now, here's the reality. The Archbishop of Canterbury was very important to GAFCON 1. That role of the Archbishop and all the roles of the instruments of unity have been completely diminished by GAFCON 2. And I think so that's why Archbishop Welby was there. He's like, nobody believes me anymore. Nobody respects me. I call for
Respects
people
the office.
respects the office. I call for people to have a little tete-a-tete after my installation, and nobody shows. In fact, we have a funny story about people trying to keep the African bishops there, and they said, no, we've got places to go. We have calendars to fulfill too, Archbishop Welby. So that was day one.
Well, Kevin, it's not quite day one.
Okay.
Because
Oh, the prize.
after the service, they had a private luncheon. And there were about half dozen Kenyan bishops, the GAFCON primates, the British High Commissioner, and a private luncheon at an outdoor courtyard restaurant. And we've had various reports on this from half a dozen people who were there, and it really was an interesting time. Justin Welby was seated at the head table. On one side was Bob Duncan, and the other side was Eliud Wabakula, the Archbishop of the ACNA and the Archbishop of Kenya, and sandwiched in between is Justin Welby. Justin Welby wore sunglasses throughout the lunch. He sort of looked like King Farouk in a nightclub, somebody who's there who just doesn't want to be seen to be there. But Peter Jensen, the General Secretary of GAFCON, gave an address to Justin Welby. And in a nutshell, Peter Jensen said, this is not a battle between political factions. This is a battle between light and dark. We're talking about spiritual warfare. Justin Welby, you cannot be a neutral bystander in a battle of spiritual light and darkness. You either must lead or get out of the way. And from every person I spoke with, European, African, American, Justin Welby came away, I think, gobsmacked. Like,
Well, I think so
bam,
too.
hit up on the side of the head that you know, I'm not going to be able to finesse this. I'm not going to be able to keep these people satisfied by my personal charm. And so, and if you look at the trajectory of Justin Welby from that dreadful video, first sermon, second sermon, and then he gave a little address after the lunch where he just sort of shook hands. Great to be here. How you doing?
Well,
He's got to think where he's going right now.
On his way out, it's like shaking hands with people wearing the No Ndaba shirts, you know, and it's a brand new thing that he had to run into. What we didn't mention was what he said in his sermon in both services, and he said in his sermon that the Anglican Communion leadership is broken.
Mm-hmm.
There's nobody leading the Anglican Communion right now. Not the ACC, not the primates, not Lambeth, not the Archbishop of Canterbury. He also said there needs to be a new leadership for the 21st century. British colonialism cannot lead the communion anymore. Now, that's quite a prize for GAFCON to have that as their inaugural sermon into their week.
And the first words out of Peter Jensen's mouth when he opened the GAFCON meeting the next morning, Monday morning, was, GAFCON is the future of the Anglican Communion. Now, some commentators have said, oh, he's being presumptuous. You have to read that, hear that in the context of Justin Welby saying, the instruments of communion are broken, there's nobody leading. That's an open invitation for GAFCON.
George, let's talk about the internals. What happens behind the scenes? You and I are there as journalists to report stories. You text away and click, 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 type, 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 type. I press the record button. Harder than what he does, obviously. And people always think of us as saints because, by and large, most reports we put out are without error. However, sometimes you make mistakes. Only you know. Sometimes we make mistakes. And I think it was Sunday night or Monday night, we put out the story that Archbishop Duncan was having some issues with his health and was not going to be able to attend GAFCON 2. There were 2 errors in the report, and we put out the report to our 15,000 viewers, and within minutes we had 2 people from the College of Bishops of the ACNA tell us we were incorrect. Mm-hmm. The way they did it was surprising to me. It showed a new type of leadership. Bishop Foley and Bishop Atwood.
Foley Beach, Bill Atwood. Mm-hmm. And the substance of the mistake was that I heard someone very close to the Archbishop make a statement, and that statement was what they wanted to happen, mm-hmm. not what was going to happen. Mm-hmm. And subsequently, I reported the bishop was going to go home for surgery when, in fact, he was going to stay in Nairobi for surgery. Mm-hmm. Well, as soon as we got the straight story, we updated it within about an hour. But what I think struck me about Bob Duncan was in Nairobi, but he was not present at GAFCON. He was not really a force. He was not a personality at that meeting. Nor, by the way, was it GAFCON 1. Mm-hmm. There was no power vacuum, oddly enough, with the ACNA. Mm-hmm. The House of Bishops of the ACNA displayed a degree of maturity and confidence that makes me very, very comfortable about what's going to happen in the future. See, Bob Duncan is going to retire within the next 12 months. And many organizations collapse when that first generation of leadership moves on. Mm-hmm. And I don't see that happening with the ACNA, given the quality of leadership that they displayed at this meeting. There was no jockeying for power. There was no trying to push ahead, nor was there among the bishops an attempt to manipulate or control or to say, only print good news. These really were godly men. And that, I think, that's a great thing.
I mean, the equivalent would be for, a Rowan Williams not to show at Lambeth or Justin Welby not to show up at the Church of England Synod. And there was no vacuum. Nobody was fretting over, oh my gosh, Archbishop Duncan isn't here to help us lead the way. What a great day and a great message for the College of Bishops of the ACNA, who will be choosing a new leader in a conclave. I'll tell you more about that some other time in June. So kudos to the ACNA.
But at the same time as the House of Bishops collectively were acting strong, I felt from the very first day a great degree of turmoil and stress and unease. And see, when I go into a meeting, or when I go into something, I'm hearing the words that are being spoken, but at the same time, I'm trying to discern what is really going on. The spirits, the movements, the political currents, the social currents. Chalk it down to CPE training, folks. I don't know. But it works for a journalist to try, where's the real story? Is it what they're saying out loud? Or is, for example, first opening press conference, Peter Jensen is smiling, speaking in the center, and all the way at the end of the table is the Archbishop of Nigeria making faces, grimacing, arms crossed like this. Obvious that he doesn't want to, something's going on. So for me, what I took away from that press conference, I got to find out what the Nigerians are up to. So that's how I work. But the conference, I really had bad feelings throughout. I mean, it really was very close at times to going off the rails. But
Yeah.
it didn't.
Well,
It didn't.
and it didn't. And you and I, we felt spiritual attack when we arrived at these things. There is spiritual warfare. I hate to refer to Ephesians 6:12, but this isn't a bunch of guys working things out. We're fighting spirits and principalities. There's warfare going on beyond our eyesight. And, GAFCON and GAFCON 2 can go either way at any time, because the worst part about Christianity is God has to use mankind to make it run. And,
Let me give you some examples of some of the behind-the-scenes stresses and conflicts that were going on at GAFCON. Now, you have to remember the conference was organized. We had some plenary meetings where everybody would gather into the main auditorium of the Trinity Center at the cathedral, and then people would break into 9 mini conferences where you signed up before GAFCON. You would be in either Episcopal ministry, the problem of Islam, marriage and family, things like that, issues that were of particular topical interest to the Anglican Church worldwide. Now, these weren't lectures. These were more like seminars where people would discuss the issues, and out of these seminars arose the material that formed the conference statement. Some of the issues that were behind the scenes discussed were rather strong. For instance, in the Episcopal group, we had some African bishops standing up saying we've got to go in and we've got to do what we did in America in the Church of England. And there were some Church of England bishops saying, wait.
yeah.
It's not as bad as the American situation. It could get that bad, but let's hold off and see how things work.
Justin Welby is not deposing people yet.
Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, yeah.
So, or we had the issue of evangelicals and Anglo-Catholics. Now, after GAFCON 1, Jack Eicher, Bishop of Fort Worth, had, I don't want to say a hard time, but he had a task of explaining to his clergy why GAFCON wasn't a sellout to evangelicalism. What was Anglo-Catholic about the GAFCON movement? So, in this meeting, the Anglo-Catholics were pushing very hard for more talk about the sacraments, more talk about ecclesiology. They wanted the phrase, one holy Catholic and apostolic church, in the final statement. There was a meeting between Lee Gaddis, who was the head of the Church Society, the evangelical group in the Church of England, and Gavin Ashenden, an Anglo-Catholic member of General Synod, and evangelicals and Anglo-Catholics in the English group got together to discuss their differences. And what was remarkable was, for the first time, I think, in 150 years, the Anglo-Catholics and evangelicals were on the same page.
Yes.
Now, the final document stripped out references to the one holy Catholic and apostolic church, and Jack Eicher said he was concerned by the lack of Catholic language. But as Michael Howe, the head of Fordham Faith, told us at lunch on the final day, that though this is not a perfect document, nonetheless, it's a start that we Anglo-Catholics can work towards. So you had right there in the fight between Catholics and evangelicals the potential for it to all fall apart. It didn't. And I know I'm talking long, Kevin, but there's another point that I wanted to talk about. and that's women bishops, women clergy.
Sure. Mhm.
There was some dissension behind the scenes on this particular point.
A little bit.
Little bit. The Church of Uganda ordains women, and next year we'll probably have the first woman bishop in the Church of Uganda, in the GAFCON movement. There are 2 South African women bishops, so they won't be the first African women bishops. So Uganda is moving forward with that. They have women clergy who are right at the point that they are now ready to be made bishops. And the Church of Uganda, Henry Arambe in particular, was a very strong supporter of women clergy.
Mm-hmm.
The Ugandan delegation pushed very strongly for language affirming the headship, leadership of women bishops. That, this is not contrary to Anglican teaching. The Church of Nigeria, whoa, we're not going there. The Sydney evangelicals, we're not touching that.
Yeah.
So the final statement affirmed the ministry of women, but didn't say what that ministry was. And that led to a no vote. One Ugandan clergy delegate, a woman priest, voted no for the final thing because there was no affirmation of women bishops. Nevertheless, GAFCON held together on a point that had the potential to derail the whole thing. The Nigerians and the Ugandans go in their separate ways over women clergy, women bishops. Didn't happen.
No, it didn't. And we report back to the spiritual warfare we felt. Well, that was, part of what was going on. There was spiritual warfare. And in the end, the guy I mentioned in the first segment, the Holy Spirit, won out because he wasn't listening to Kevin and George. He wasn't listening to the Nigerians. He wasn't listening to the Ugandans. He was setting the pace of GAFCON. And, we applauded Bishop Mins. We will certainly applaud the Holy Spirit for his work at GAFCON. Okay, now we're going to talk about the GAFCON 2 report. Let's just say Kevin Carlson likes very curtailed, short reports, 1 page at the most, especially for resumes. I get resumes from future employees all the time, and if it's more than 1 page, it doesn't really make it to my desk. The GAFCON 2 report probably wouldn't have made it to my desk because it was 4 pages. It's long. There's stuff you could have taken a red marker to. And I think one of the problems is we're readdressing issues that have already been addressed in previous GAFCON meetings. Mm-hmm. And I find that especially when talking about the homosexuality, instead of referencing previously discussed stuff, they reprint it all over again. And I understand the concern. I understand that sexuality is going to be a fight in the church and outside the church for the next several generations. But we need to be very curtailed and succinct about our language, George.
Yes, and well, for instance, you talk about homosexuality. There were references to we oppose government attempts to normalize gay marriage and so on and so on and so forth. Against gay bishops, gay blessings, and now all of that was, if you will, covered in Jerusalem, in the Jerusalem Declaration, but it was put in at the insistence of the Nigerians. There was language that was added about abortion and supporting the right to life from birth to natural death. Again, worthy goal. I don't disagree with any of that.
Right.
But why does that need to be in the GAFCON statement too? And so, in other words, there was a question of focus. Who is your audience? Is this an internal document, or where we're sort of laying out what we want to do internally, or is this a document that we're going to send out to the world? And they didn't really have as tight a sense of what the purpose of this document was for, from my perspective.
Sure.
Okay. Nobody asked me.
And I think for the future, GAFCON needs to look in a different direction than now. Anglicans, especially primates, love to get together and put out a communique. It's the way it is. I think it's once you're a bishop and you go to these things, something tells you we need to tell people about this, and that's laudable.
Well, let me tell
Yeah.
you, let me give you an example of the dangers of this sort of stuff.
Sure.
First draft came out, and I didn't like the first draft. It had some problems.
Sure.
And one of the problems was that there was this expansive language about allowing bishops to cross geographic boundaries to support persecuted minorities, and that you could just do it. Well, I pointed out to the Diocese of Sydney and to some of the Fort Worth people that what this says is it now gives permission. If you've got a bishop within GAFCON who supports women clergy, and Sydney won't ordain women, or Fort Worth won't ordain women, he can ordain women in that diocese on behalf of GAFCON. And you say, oh no, such a thing would never happen. Folks, remember the Charles Benison rule.
Oui, yes.
Laws are tested not by the pure of heart, but by the worst possible person. So the final draft cleaned up all that language and said we're going to have cross-border jurisdictional violations in support of oppressed and persecuted minorities with the approval of the Primates Council, and that's going to be done by consensus. So, in other words, no more AMIA, finding some bishop in the back of the beyond saying, we're now Anglicans because we found one bishop who's allowed us to do this or that. No, unless the Primates Council signs off, a bishop from the Congo can't be paid to do something. No planning of churches within other jurisdictions. In other words, when you have these sort of documents that you put together in a week, you've got to take in mind that somebody's going to abuse them, therefore need to be short, succinct, and not open to being stretched.
There's
In
a
my
reason,
opinion.
you know, I mean, there's a reason the Nicene Creed was not created in one meeting. I mean, it takes a lot to put what we believe succinctly into a document that can be shared and believed by all and represents the faith. And I found the GAFCON 2 report a little wordy, my own humble opinion and George's. Now, yeah.
I'm gonna now say good things.
Okay, yes.
I'm gonna say good things because I don't want to get letter bombs in the mail from people. The final document, you need to look at it in two parts. One was a strategic overview, what we hope to achieve within the Anglican world. Theological education, for instance, for Archbishop Jensen of Sydney, is the major thing to come out of GAFCON. He believes that it'll take a generation or two to reform the Anglican Communion, and you start that by having strong seminaries that turn out solid clergy and educated lay people. And I know there's a plan to start with a base of 4 seminaries, Trinity in Ambridge, George Whitfield College in South Africa, Moore College in Sydney, Australia, and Oak Hill in London, as being, if you will, the intellectual generators of the GAFCON renewal movement.
Sure.
Now, where's Nashotah House? That's the Anglo-Catholic problem we're having
Yes.
again. So, you know, it's all a work in progress. But the point is there's a strategic initiative to change people's hearts and minds through education. And then there's the tactical stuff. We're going to go in, we're going to support conservatives in the Church of England, we're going to help them form a third province. It's not going to be a legal province, but it'll be an effective province in England for those who cannot take what's coming down the pike, same-sex blessings, and women bishops.
Now, one of the shortcomings I see of GAFCON is they need to form a working committee called the Anglican Acronym Society. Somebody who can control all these acronyms. We've had AMIE, AMIA, ACNA, GAFCON itself, and it's getting a little out of control. We need somebody to get to work on that. Let's talk a little bit about AMIE, the Anglican Mission in England. One of the things set forth by GAFCON is a need to help those who are being disaffected by the political turmoil going on in England.
Yes.
Now, is Justin Welby deposing people like happened here in America? No. How much prosecution and persecution is going on? And at what point does GAFCON step in and say, we need to say, hold it here? Or is this something they can handle internally? Can the bishops work out a cross-border situation internally in England and work out this situation?
What we discerned in talking to the English delegation, members of the English delegation, is that while there is not the degree of dysfunction in the Church of England that there is in the Episcopal Church, you're right, no one is being deposed, there is a very weak house of bishops who come from sort of a liberal Catholic perspective. In other words, there are no conservative evangelical bishops in the Church of England anymore. The head of Reform, Rod Thomas, said that if you're conservative evangelical, you'll be allowed to be a priest, but don't expect preference, sympathy, or support from your bishop. You'll be tolerated, but you won't be embraced. Now compare that to the U.S., where you're actively persecuted in some parts, or you have to be in a safe diocese like Central Florida to exercise your ministry. However, in England, the legal situation is changing very rapidly. Canon Gavin Ashenden told us he expects within 5 to 7 years there will be English priests jailed for refusing to kowtow to the government's pro-gay agenda, for not marrying people, or for not, for refusing to accept what the government calls the new normal on homosexuality. Mm-hmm. And will the Church of England support its clergy? The conservatives don't think so.
No, they don't. And we've heard very well-sourced rumors that what's the name of that report coming out? The
Pilling Report.
The Pilling Report supports, page 4, paragraph 3, if you want to look it up, if you hold it in your hands, the blessing of same-sex marriage, or not marriage, same-sex blessings of
civil partnerships.
Civil partnerships. It's so hard for a Christian to try and explain this because it doesn't make any sense. Same-sex partnerships. It will not allow for blessings of heterosexual partnerships that are unmarried, thus the hypocrisy. So we've heard on good authority that Justin Welby is going to give up the case. Mm-hmm. He's not going to fight it. He's going to have to just deal with, we're just going to have to deal with what the government does. We're not going to separate from the church state situation we have in England. And that is going to cause a lot of turmoil and may require outside influence from GAFCON.
Now, it's not a done deal,
mm-hmm.
but our compatriot David Old has reported on excellent authority internally in the Church of England, and we have heard it in Nairobi.
Peter Old, right?
Peter Old.
Sorry. Twins.
Sorry. The Old brothers.
Yes.
The one in England.
Yes.
The one in England has reported on his blog about the Church of England is going to say no to gay marriage, but yes to the blessing of same-sex unions, because that's a pastoral response. They're going down the Episcopal Church line. Hmm? And Archbishop Welby, the story that we're hearing is that that's as good as I'm going to get right now, and we're going to cut our losses and fight that battle. Now, if that happens, there's going to be another exodus from the Church of England, and the Anglican mission in England is being designed to prevent a fragmentation into half a dozen different groups. Here, Anglo-Catholics and evangelicals and charismatics. As Canon Ashenden told us, if we act now, before the crisis, to get a structure in order, we can prevent having a fragmentation and have these people kept within the fold and rebuild the church from within and not be excluded because of their faith.
George and I have dealt with church polity for quite a while. The Episcopal Church is not what I would call a transparent church. I know. Oh, really? Yeah, really. I was at a meeting they had at the House of Bishops, or one of their meetings with the high-ups they had in New Jersey. And there was...
Executive Council.
Executive Council. Thank you so much. And I went there with our friend Steve Waring. He was with the Living Church at the time. And he was trying to explain to me how things work. And I'm talking, what about sunshine laws? What about all these rules that protect journalists? Doesn't apply. And I said, yeah, whatever. So we're sitting down in a meeting over some climate change meeting, and two of the people at the head table were arguing about where to put the comma in a sentence. They stopped the meeting and they asked the press to leave. You've got to be kidding. It's a comma. So I learned that The Episcopal Church does not want to be transparent in any way, shape, or form.
How much have they spent on legal fees?
I don't know. So, when I watched the Anglican Church in North America Forum, and I had discussions with Archbishop Duncan, he said, we're going to do things differently. We're going to be very transparent. And lo and behold, the Anglican Church in North America has been. And I commend Archbishop Duncan, the College of Bishops, the press office for their transparency. I also need to commend GAFCON for their transparency. Yes, there's structural problems, there's communication problems. You're brand new, but it's evident by now you're here to stay. George and Kevin's low expectations have been profoundly denied. Now, we need to talk about the future of GAFCON. George and I have no say, but we have an opinion. And I think the future of GAFCON has a very ripe opportunity given to you by Justin Welby, who proclaims there's no leadership in the church, that we need to change the structures of the 21st century, and GAFCON may be a gift to Archbishop Welby. But I don't think the gift is in long reports. I think the gift here would be into a very succinct covenant for the Anglican Communion, which desires that right now. It desires something that's going to hold them in common, because we don't have a magisterium, we don't have a pope, we don't have anything right now in common. And they've tried once and failed at the Anglican Communion to have a covenant. But the desire is still there. Bishop Manier would love to have a covenant. John Chu, I can go through all the different Global South people who would want to sign on to a covenant that declares who the Anglican Communion is, what it believes, how the accountability works, and how the church is going to grow. I think that is the future, or I would hope that would be a future that GAFCON would proceed into, George.
I agree with you, Kevin, and it leads into a point that I want to make. If GAFCON primates, if you're listening, what was there out of this conference that would want to have, that I, a conservative Episcopalian who am not getting ready to jump ship, would want to be part of GAFCON? What would make Dallas or Albany or Central Florida want to be part of this movement? And what would make Munir and Nice? What would make Ian Ernest of the Indian Ocean, the Indian churches, the Chinese churches, and the Asian churches? I mean, there's numerically the Nigerians are the big guys and big team in town, but there's a lot of us else out there, and I think they need to sort of broaden the pie. Neil LaBar said, the Bishop of the Gulf Atlantic Diocese, the ACNA, told us that he saw this as a unity document. Well, it is a unity document within the GAFCON circle. Now I think they need to start to expand this circle. Now that's not to say they're going to water down their doctrine and discipline and their beliefs. I mean, but it is saying that you've got to sort of make the political determination that you want to add allies, fellow travelers, to make this thing work.
And I don't want to say you have to wait till GAFCON 3 to do this. This is something that would be held really well by the primates to put together a working committee, and I think it's something that could be done very soon, because people want to belong to something. The Archbishop of Canterbury says we're broken. We are no longer a community.
They should make a goal of bringing Justin Welby onto the Primates Council. Look, if Justin Welby can be member of the Pourvu Primates Council, and the Pourvu are the Nordic Lutheran churches and European Anglicans, and they don't do anything except meet and say how wonderful it is that we meet, they should work to bring Justin Welby on. It's not an official representative of the Church of England, because GAFCON is unofficial. It's not a legal entity in that sense. But work to bring Justin Welby on board. Work to bring Munir Nice on board.
Sure. And neither would be a first among equals. I think you have to understand, there's a new game in town. The old thing is out. You get to write the rules now. And use that opportunity to your best.
I've got I have other suggestions, Kevin.
Before we close,
let me tell you.
Go.
There's a mismatch right now. If you look at the structures within GAFCON, you have the people who need GAFCON, the people who don't need GAFCON, and the people who pay for GAFCON. Right now, the people who don't need GAFCON are calling the shots. The Nigerians, the Ugandans, the Kenyans, the Sydney crowd. They don't really need GAFCON to do the work of their church in their particular locale. The English, the Americans, the South Africans, they need GAFCON. And the focus because of the numerical superiority and because of the sort of gratitude, thank you for helping us get the ACNA going. Thank you for helping us get the AMIE going. They're less willing to push forward and say, look, these are the real issues that we need to go against, not really the issues that the Nigerians or the Ugandans think are important. Because what is GAFCON for? If it's going to be for theological education, if it's going to be for helping the English conservative, need to get more input from the people from their consumers, and not allow it to be driven by the people who really don't need it. And at the same time, the people who pay for it are a third constituency that they don't really seem to know how to cultivate. They don't seem to know how to go to the people who have the money to make this thing work. There's still a mindset of there's a parish newsletter mindset to GAFCON. They've had dreadful communication. Did we hear anything, Kevin, in the 5 years since GAFCON 1?
No, and well, part of the problem is money. Peter Jensen, I've been told, basically has
big
run
house,
GAFCON
by the way.
and
It's
FCA
the Bishop's
out of
Palace in
his
Sydney, but
house.
still.
And big house. Now, the reality is GAFCON needs to find these resources and stuff like that. If you think for a minute that Archbishop Justin Welby would not change his focus from the Episcopal Church to GAFCON if there was financial resources he could obtain like he does from the Episcopal Church, you're wrong. Money does speak volumes, not through power, not through influence, but through observation. All right, we're closing out the GAFCON appraisal show, where George and I told you everything we wanted you to know about GAFCON. Now, these are just opinions. George and I are really nobodies. We're proof that God can use the lowest of the low to get his word out. And we thank God for that. I had a great trip to Nairobi. Nairobi has not changed much in 5 years since I was there for the installation of Bishop Atwood and Murdoch. This is the third world country with a big city in it, but the traffic is still bad, and not much to the infrastructure of the city has changed. I just read a report that they're having trouble now with new laws that are trying to be harder on the press. Stuff still happens in these countries despite the wonderful time we have in it, and we need to keep places like Kenya, Tanzania, Zanzibar, Uganda in your prayers all the time. Tell you a little bit about my flight. I left here at JFK early in the morning, landed in Dubai 12 hours later, had a 2-hour layover there, arrived in Nairobi 8 in the morning, had a great day, great time, met George out. Didn't suffer any jet lag this time. How did you do, George?
Oh, I had a miserable trip. Oh, it was awful. I mean, coming home, I fell down the ramp at the airport. Nairobi is, they don't have jetways out to the planes for United. You've got to walk down to the tarmac. Well, I fell down to the tarmac. It was like watching Homer Simpson. Boom, bam, bing, bam. I'm not too steady on my feet. And there were storms in Europe which delayed my flight, so I went from Nairobi, Brussels to Washington, Washington to Orlando, and then Orlando, drive south for 2 hours. So it took me almost 30 hours to get home from the point that I left. But I got home, thank goodness, and found myself up to my elbows in cats.
Yes, amazing. Yeah, a lot changes when you leave for 10 days. In my case, I got home and I saw my wife for 4 hours before she caught a flight to Huntsville for a meeting she had there for a week. Life of the 21st century. We want to thank you for your prayers. We want to thank you for helping finance it. We're going through the numbers. We may be next week asking you for a little bit more money. We'll be putting our hands out, or if you watch the bloopers, you're going to see what happens when you give well to Anglican TV.
I'm George Conger, and you've been watching episode 84 of Anglican Unscripted. Kevin, I want to show you what happens when I leave this house for any period of time whatsoever. Now, for our viewers,
Okay. Now, for our viewers, now a lot of people donated to Anglican Unscripted and Anglican TV so we could go to GAFCON. And right now, George has how many kittens?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay, we are sending 5 kittens to the 5 highest people who gave to Anglican Unscripted without any questions asked. We have your address, and you'll be receiving these within the next couple days. When are they weaned?
Oh, give it about another. I think it takes. How long before they're weaned? About 6 weeks.
They're 3 weeks old, so.
So,
Okay,
and
you have to lift it a little higher so they can see. Now, to our 5 highest givers, you're going to receive one of these in the mail, and you will know who you are when you get the cat.
and I'm not putting a return address label on this.
No, yeah.
On this.
You have to lift a little
Lift
higher,
it a little
George. So that
higher. Now,
Yeah.
which one is this?
That's
Well,
Goblin.
look, this is Goblin. He's sort of fat.
Uh-huh.
And who is this?
Uh-huh.
That's Bear.
This is Bear. Bear is a little long.
Little higher,
Yes.
but right about where your face is.
Oh,
Yep. Okay.
And the cat's taking him back into the closet.
Ghost.
They almost were born in my shirt drawer. I'd left the drawer was open, and
Yeah.
oh well, I think this is a little strenuous for them. And
So, if you receive a cat in the mail from Anglican TV, it means you were one of the biggest givers to this year's fundraising component. What a surprise!
there, you want to put him back now?
Well, now you're in trouble. You're in trouble.